The diplomatic vessel Eternal Dawn moved through the darkness of space like a white dove among wolves. Inside the command bridge, Captain Heejin watched the viewing screen as the massive planet of Drumath Prime grew larger. She had been a captain for 15 years, but this was her first time entering enemy territory. Well, not exactly enemy territory, not yet. The Vortan Collective had agreed to peace talks after all. "We're being scanned again," said Lieutenant Daehyun from his station. The young officer's jaw was tight, his fingers hovering over the tactical display. "That's the third time in 10 minutes. Let them scan," Heejin replied calmly. "We have nothing to hide." Daehyun didn't look convinced. None of the crew did. They all knew the Vortans were dangerous. The insectoid warriors had conquered 12 star systems in the last 20 years. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger, and their soldiers more aggressive than almost any other species in the galaxy. Everyone knew the Vortans saw humans as weak. In the diplomatic quarters below the bridge, Envoy Taman reviewed his notes one final time. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. For 30 years, he had negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges across the galaxy. He had stopped 3 wars before they started. He believed in words and patience in finding common ground. Violence, he often said, was the failure of imagination. His aide, Ambassador Jiwan, entered the room carrying 2 cups of tea. She was younger, sharp-minded, and spoke 17 alien languages fluently. She set 1 cup beside Taman's datapad and kept the other for herself. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Taman smiled slightly. "Always, but nervous means I care. The day I stop being nervous about peace is the day I should retire. The crew thinks this is a trap," Jiwan said quietly. "Half of them want to turn around." "I know." Taman sipped his tea. "But turning around means war will come eventually. If we don't try now, if we don't extend our hand first, then we're no better than those who choose violence. Earth didn't survive the resource wars just to become another aggressive empire." Jiwan nodded, but her expression remained worried. She had read the intelligence reports. The Vortans had been moving military ships into position near human colonies. Their propaganda called humans soft creatures and cowards hiding behind words. Overlord Krenth, the Vortan leader, had only agreed to these talks because the Galactic Council had pressured him. There were rumors he had laughed when he accepted. On the bridge, the communication officer turned to Captain Heejin. "We're receiving landing coordinates. They want us to set down at the Grand Council chamber in the capital city." "Acknowledged," Heejin said. She activated the ship-wide channel. "All hands prepare for landing. Security teams report to the shuttle bay. Envoy Taman will be ready to depart in 20 minutes." The Eternal Dawn descended through Drumath Prime's atmosphere. The planet was beautiful in a harsh way. Red mountains rose from purple valleys. The cities were massive structures of black metal and crystal. Everything looked designed for war. Even the architecture seemed aggressive. They landed on a platform surrounded by Vortan soldiers. The aliens stood over 2 meters tall, their exoskeletons gleaming in the sunlight. They carried plasma rifles and watched the human ship with compound eyes that revealed nothing. Their faces had no expressions humans could read. Taman stood in the shuttle bay adjusting his formal diplomatic robes. Beside him, Jiwon checked her translation device one more time. 6 human security officers, dressed in light armor and carrying sidearms, formed up behind them. They were there for ceremony more than protection. Everyone knew that if the Vortans wanted to kill them, 6 guards wouldn't matter. "Remember," Taman said to his team, "we are representing all of humanity. Every word, every gesture, every expression will be analyzed. Show respect but not fear. Show strength but not aggression. We are here to build a bridge." Lieutenant Daehyun watched from the bridge as the diplomatic team walked down the landing ramp. His hands moved over his console, checking and rechecking the ship's weapon systems. They were online, fully charged, but locked. Earth's rules of engagement were clear. Fire only in self-defense and only after all other options were exhausted. He hated those rules. "Sir," he said to Captain Heejin, "I'm detecting elevated energy readings from those orbital platforms. They're military installations, not civilian structures. And they're powered up to combat readiness," Heejin frowned. "Are they targeting us?" "Not yet, but they could be within seconds. Noted in the log. But we hold position. We're here in peace, even if they're not?" Daehyun asked. Heejin didn't answer. She just watched the screen as Taman's team disappeared into the massive building. The Grand Council chamber was designed to intimidate. The ceiling stretched 30 meters high. Columns of black stone lined the walls. each one carved with scenes of Vortan military victories. The floor was polished so smooth it reflected everything like dark water. At the far end of the hall sat Overlord Krenth on a throne made of melted enemy ships. Taman walked forward slowly, his footsteps echoing. Jiwan stayed at his side, her eyes taking in every detail. The Vortan warriors lined the walls, at least 50 of them, all armed. This was supposed to be a peaceful negotiation. Why so many soldiers? Overlord Krenth was enormous, even for a Vortan. His exoskeleton was decorated with gold and silver, marking his victories. When he spoke, his voice came through a translator device that made it sound like grinding metal. "Humans," he said. "You are smaller than I expected." Taman bowed slightly. "Overlord Krenth, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Earth hopes that together we can avoid conflict and build a lasting peace between our peoples." Peace. Krenth repeated the word like it was something distasteful. "Your kind speaks much of peace. You have no great fleet. You have won no glorious battles. And yet you claim territory and space that we desire. Explain this contradiction." "There is no contradiction," Taman said calmly. "We claim territory through settlement and development, not conquest. We build rather than destroy. We believe there is room in the galaxy for all civilizations to thrive without taking from others." Several Vortan commanders standing near the throne made clicking sounds with their mandibles. Jiwan's translator identified it as laughter. "Weakness," Krenth said. "You call it philosophy, but it is simply weakness." Taman felt the security officers tense behind him, but he kept his voice level. "With respect, Overlord, we see it differently. Strength is not only measured in weapons. Earth has technologies, resources, and knowledge we would gladly share through partnership rather than conflict." Partnership. Krenth leaned forward. "What could humans possibly offer us that we cannot take?" For 3 hours they talked. Taman presented proposals. He showed charts of resource sharing. He explained how economic cooperation would benefit both civilizations more than war. He spoke of cultural exchange, of learning from each other, of building something greater together than either species could build alone. Krenth listened. Sometimes he asked questions. Sometimes he consulted with his commanders in their clicking language. But his body language, even through the alien form, communicated something Jiwan recognized from her years of diplomatic service. Contempt. When the first session ended, Taman and his team were shown to guest quarters in the city. The rooms were comfortable but monitored. Cameras watched their every move. "He's not going to agree," Jiwan said once they were alone. "He's going through the motions because the council is watching, but he has no intention of making peace." "I know," Taman said quietly. "But we have to try. If we walk away now, war is certain. If we stay, if we keep talking, maybe we find a way through." Back on the Eternal Dawn, Captain Hyojin couldn't sleep. She stood in her quarters looking at a picture of Earth. She had joined the Defense Force 25 years ago, right after the last human conflict ended. She had trained for war but never fought one. No one in Earth's military had fought a real war in 200 years. They were peacekeepers, defenders, protectors, but never aggressors. She wondered what would happen if that changed. What would humans become if they were forced to fight? Would they remember how? The history book said that humans had once been very, very good at war. Too good. So good they nearly destroyed themselves. That was why Earth chose peace. Not because they couldn't fight, but because they knew what fighting cost. Her communicator beeped. It was Lieutenant Daehyun. "Captain, those orbital platforms are running targeting solutions. I'm seeing it in their energy patterns. They're practicing shooting us." "Noted," Hyojin said. "Maintain yellow alert. Keep shields ready to deploy on my command, but do not charge weapons. We will not be the ones to start a war." "Understood," Daehyun said, but she could hear the frustration in his voice. 3 days passed. Taman met with Krenth each day. The negotiations went nowhere. The Vortan leader made impossible demands. He insisted humans abandon their colonies. He wanted access to Earth's technology with nothing offered in return. He was not negotiating, he was dictating. On the 4th day, Taman decided to make one final appeal. He prepared a speech about cooperation, about the future, about what their species could build together. He practiced it in his quarters with Jiwan listening and offering suggestions. "If this doesn't work," she said, "we should leave. We've tried everything." "One more day," Taman insisted. "One more chance. That's all I ask." Neither of them knew that Overlord Krenth had already made his decision. The human envoy would never deliver his final speech. The peace mission was about to end in blood and fire, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The morning of the fourth day began like the others. Taman woke early, reviewed his notes, and drank tea while watching the alien sun rise over the Vortan capital. The city was already alive with activity. Vortan workers moved between buildings, military transports flew overhead, and the ever-present soldiers patrolled every street. This was a civilization built on conquest and control. Taman wondered if they even understood what peace meant. Jiwan knocked on his door at exactly 7 o'clock. She carried her datapad and wore the formal blue robes of Earth's diplomatic service. Her face showed the exhaustion they all felt after days of fruitless negotiations. "Ready for another day of being insulted?" she asked with a tired smile. "Always," Taman replied, "though I prefer to think of it as another opportunity to find common ground. There is no common ground with Krenth. He wants war. He's just waiting for an excuse." Taman nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But we cannot give him that excuse. If war comes, it must be clear to everyone in the galaxy that Earth did everything possible to prevent it." The security team assembled in the hallway, 6 officers in light armor, their sidearms holstered. Their leader, Sergeant Minsu, was a veteran who had served in the defense forces for 30 years without ever firing a shot in combat. He approached Taman and bowed slightly. "Sir, I need to report something. 3 of our officers saw Vortan soldiers moving heavy weapons into the council chamber last night. Not ceremonial weapons, combat gear." Taman frowned. "Did you report this to Captain Hiejin?" "Yes, sir. She wants you to cancel today's meeting. And if I cancel, Krenth will claim we insulted him by refusing to negotiate. He'll have his excuse for war." Taman shook his head. "No, we proceed as planned. But everyone stays alert." The transport arrived at 8 o'clock. It was a Vortan military vehicle, heavily armored and covered in weapon mounts. The driver said nothing as the human delegation climbed aboard. The ride to the Grand Council chamber took 15 minutes through streets lined with Vortan citizens, who stopped to stare at the humans. Some pointed. Others made aggressive gestures. None looked friendly. On the eternal dawn, Captain Heejin watched the transport through satellite feed. Lieutenant Daehyun sat at his station, his face pale with worry. "This is wrong," he said. "Everything about this feels wrong." "I know," Heejin replied. "But our orders are clear. We observe and we protect, but we do not act first. Even if acting first means saving lives?" Heejin didn't answer. She activated the communication channel to the diplomatic team. "Envoy Taman, this is Eternal Dawn. We are monitoring your position. At the first sign of trouble, we will come for you." Taman's voice came back calm and steady. "Understood, Captain. But I don't think we'll need a rescue. This is just another day of negotiations." He was wrong. The Grand Council chamber looked different today. More soldiers lined the walls, at least twice as many as before. The lighting seemed darker, casting strange shadows across the polished floor. Overlord Krenth sat on his throne, but several of his top military commanders stood beside him. Their weapons were visible, plasma rifles held at rest but ready. Taman walked forward with his usual dignity. Jiwon stayed close to his left side. The security team spread out in a loose formation behind them, their hands near their weapons but not touching them. Sergeant Minsu's eyes moved constantly, tracking every Vortan soldier, every shadow, every possible threat. "Overlord Krenth," Taman began, "I hope today we can make real progress toward peace. Earth has prepared new proposals that I believe will benefit both our peoples." Krenth said nothing for a long moment. Then he stood, his massive form rising from the throne. The sound of his exoskeleton moving echoed through the chamber. "Human," he said, his translated voice harsh, "I have heard your proposals. I have listened to your words, and I have decided that words are worthless. You come here with nothing but promises and weakness. You offer partnership, but you have nothing we want, nothing we cannot take." Taman felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "Overlord, what you can take by force will cost you in blood and resources. What we offer freely will cost you nothing and benefit everyone." "You speak of cost?" Krenth's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Humans understand nothing of cost. You have never conquered. You have never dominated. You are prey pretending to be equals." Several of the Vortan commanders moved forward slightly. Sergeant Minsu's hand dropped to his weapon. "Sir," he whispered urgently to Taman, "we need to leave. Now." But Taman raised his hand. "No, we stay. This is just posturing. He looked directly at Krenth. Overlord, I understand that your culture values strength, but there are many kinds of strength. The strength to build, the strength to heal, the strength to choose peace when war is easier. Weakness, Krenth roared. All of it is weakness. That's when everything went wrong. The Vortan soldiers along the walls moved in perfect synchronization. They weren't ceremonial guards. They were assassins. Their plasma rifles came up in one smooth motion, targeting the human delegation. Sergeant Minsu saw it first. Down! He screamed, drawing his sidearm. The first shot caught Taman in the chest before he could move. The impact threw him backward, his formal robes burning. Ji-won threw herself toward him, screaming his name. The second shot hit her in the back. She fell across Taman's body, still reaching for him. The human security team returned fire, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Sergeant Minsu took down 3 Vortan soldiers before a plasma burst caught him in the shoulder. He kept firing, backing toward the entrance, trying to cover the 2 junior officers still alive. On the Eternal Dawn, Captain Hyojin watched in horror as the video feed showed the massacre. She could see Taman falling, Ji-won collapsing, the security team fighting desperately against impossible odds. All weapons online now, she shouted. Shields up! Lock targeting solutions on those orbital platforms. Lieutenant Daehyun's hands flew across his console. Weapons charged.
I have firing solutions.
Permission to engage. Heejin's hand hovered over the command button. Everything in her wanted to press it, to rain fire on the Vortons, to make them pay for what they were doing. But Earth's laws were absolute. Defense only, no first strikes. And technically they hadn't attacked the ship. Negative, she said, her voice breaking. Deploy the shuttle. Medical team and armed recovery unit. Get our people out of there. In the council chamber, 2 security officers were still alive. They dragged Sergeant Minsu toward the exit, returning fire as they moved. Bodies lay everywhere, both human and Vortan. The 2 junior officers, Corporal Sung-ho and Private Nari, fought with desperate courage. Sung-ho's arm was broken, but he still fired his weapon. Nari had taken a hit to her leg and was limping badly. They reached the entrance and stumbled into the sunlight. The human shuttle was already landing, its boarding ramp dropping. Medical personnel rushed out, but in the chamber it was over. Taman lay on the polished floor, his blood pooling around him. Ji-won was draped across him, her eyes open but seeing nothing. The rest of the security team lay where they had fallen, having fought to the last breath to protect their envoy. Overlord Krenth walked down from his throne and stood over Taman's body. He looked at the dead human for a long moment, then activated a communication device. Citizens of the Vortan Collective and members of the Galactic Council, he announced. The humans came to our world claiming peace, but they were spies and saboteurs. We discovered their plot and eliminated the threat. Any aggression from Earth will be met with total war. This is our right and our strength. It was a lie. Every word was a lie, but Krenth controlled all communications from the planet. His version of events would reach the galaxy first. On the shuttle racing back to the Eternal Dawn, Sergeant Minsu was barely conscious. The medics worked frantically to save him, but he kept trying to speak. They planned it, he whispered through the pain. It was an assassination, planned from the start. Get word to Earth. Tell them what really happened. Corporal Sung-ho, his broken arm secured in a splint, had managed to keep his helmet camera running throughout the entire attack. The footage was automatically uploading to the ship's secure servers. Every second of the massacre had been recorded. The truth would reach Earth, even if Krenth's lies reached the rest of the galaxy first. Captain Hyojin met them in the shuttle bay. She knelt beside the stretcher carrying Sergeant Minsu, taking his hand. I'm sorry, she said, tears running down her face. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. Minsu squeezed her hand weakly. Not your fault. Get us home. Tell everyone this was murder. The Eternal Dawn broke orbit 15 minutes later, her engines pushing to maximum speed. Behind them, Vortan warships moved into pursuit positions but didn't fire. They had won. They had killed Earth's envoy and would suffer no consequences. Or so they thought. The journey back to human space took 6 days. During that time, the crew of the Eternal Dawn watched as Overlord Krenth's propaganda spread across the galaxy. Some species believed him. Others remained neutral. A few expressed sympathy for Earth but did nothing. Lieutenant Daehyun spent those 6 days reviewing the helmet camera footage over and over. He watched Taman fall. He watched Ji-won die protecting him. He watched brave soldiers fighting impossible odds, and with each viewing, something cold and hard formed in his chest. "They're going to pay for this," he said to Captain Heijin on the fourth day. She didn't correct him. She didn't remind him that Earth was a peaceful civilization. She just nodded. "Yes," she said quietly. "They are." When the Eternal Dawn finally reached Earth orbit, every ship in the defense fleet was waiting. They formed an honor guard for the fallen. But they also formed something else. They formed the beginning of a fleet that would soon make the Vortans regret what they had done. Taemin's body was brought home in a flag-draped casket. Jiwon's beside him. The 4 security officers who died defending them came home as heroes. Earth mourned. Billions watched the funeral services. Billions watched the video footage of the assassination that was broadcast on every channel. And in that moment, something changed in humanity. The anger was not hot and wild. It was cold and focused. It was the anger of a species that had chosen peace not because they couldn't fight, but because they remembered what fighting cost. They remembered, and they were ready to remind the Vortans of what humanity had once been, and what humanity could become again when pushed too far. In the Galactic Council chambers, the other species watched Earth's reaction with growing concern. This was not the response they expected. There was no panicking, no desperate calls for protection, just a calm, terrible silence. One ambassador from the Keltharian Empire, a species that had fought humans 2 centuries ago in a brief trade dispute, sent an urgent message to his government. "Evacuate all citizens from sectors near Vortan space immediately." The humans are not panicking. They are preparing, and anyone who thinks humans are weak has never seen them angry. Overlord Krenth, watching from Drumath Prime, saw the news reports and laughed. Let the humans prepare. Let them try. His fleets were ready. His armies were strong. And humans were just prey animals that didn't know their place yet. He would learn. They all would learn. The war was about to start, and humanity had not forgotten how to fight. They had just been waiting for a reason. Earth had not been silent in 200 years like it was silent now. In cities across every continent, people stopped and watched the news. They saw the footage of Taemin falling. They saw Jiwon die trying to protect him. They saw brave soldiers fighting to the last breath. And when the footage ended, there was no screaming, no riots, no chaos. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes before thunder. In Geneva, the Earth Defense Council met in emergency session. 50 representatives from every major government sat around a circular table. At the head sat President Kangman, a man who had spent his entire career working for peace. He was 70 years old and had never expected to face this moment. "The evidence is clear," he said, his voice steady, but his hands trembling slightly. "The Vortans assassinated our diplomatic team in cold blood. It was premeditated murder. They planned to kill Envoy Taemin from the moment they agreed to talks. The question before us now is simple. How do we respond?" The Minister of Defense, a woman named Somin, stood. She was a former admiral who had retired 5 years ago. She had hoped to never wear a uniform again. "We respond with overwhelming force," she said flatly. "The Vortans understand only one language. If we do not answer this with strength, every aggressive species in the galaxy will see us as acceptable targets. We must show them that killing humans has consequences." A few council members nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. The Minister of Peace, an elderly man named Dokje, raised his hand. "Violence will only lead to more violence. We should appeal to the Galactic Council, seek justice through proper channels. Show that we are better than this." "They killed our diplomats," Somin shouted. "They murdered Taemin while he was offering them peace, and you want to file a complaint?" "I want to not become the monsters. We spent 2 centuries trying to rise above," Dokje replied quietly. President Kangman let them argue. He knew this debate needed to happen, but he also knew what his decision would be. He had known it the moment he saw Taemin fall. Some things could not be forgiven. Some crimes demanded justice, not process. He stood, and the room fell silent. "Earth has tried peace," he said. "We have tried diplomacy, negotiation, and understanding. We have done everything we could to avoid this moment. But the Vortans have made their choice. They have declared war through action, even if not through words, and so I invoke Article 7 of the Defense Charter. The room went completely quiet. Article 7 had never been invoked, not once in 200 years. It was the article that authorized total military mobilization, the article that suspended normal rules of engagement, the article that essentially declared war. May the vote begin, President Kangman said. The vote was 47-3. Earth would go to war. Within hours, orders went out across human space. Military bases that had been quiet for decades roared to life. Shipyards that built cargo vessels began converting their production lines. Soldiers who had retired were called back to service. Young men and women lined up at recruitment centers, ready to serve. At the orbital defense station above Earth, Admiral Minho received the orders while standing on the command deck. He was 53 years old and had spent his entire career preparing for a war he prayed would never come. He had studied every battle in human history. He had designed strategies and trained crews, and built weapon systems that were supposed to stay locked away forever. Now everything was about to change. All fleet commanders, he said into the communication channel, his voice carrying to every ship in Earth's defense fleet. This is Admiral Minho. As of this moment, we are at war with the Vorton Collective. All vessels are to report to battle stations. All weapon systems are to be unlocked. All experimental technologies are authorized for deployment. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. On military bases across Earth and her colonies, soldiers received the same message. General Yunji, commander of Earth's Marine Corps, stood in front of 10,000 Marines at Camp Victory in South Korea. She was 41 years old and had lost her parents in the last human conflict, the resource wars that nearly destroyed Earth. She had become a soldier to prevent war, not to fight one. But now war had found them anyway. Marines, she said, her voice amplified across the base. The Vortons believe we are weak. They believe that 200 years of peace have made us soft. They believe that humans have forgotten how to fight. They are wrong. Our parents and grandparents chose peace not because they couldn't fight, but because they knew what fighting cost. They built a better world, and now these alien bastards have threatened that world. So we are going to remind the galaxy what happens when you push humans too far. Are you ready? 10,000 voices roared in response. The sound echoed across the base like thunder. Deep in the research facilities beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Sunwoo received a message he had hoped would never come. It was a single line. Unlock everything. He stood in front of a massive vault door, his hand on the biometric scanner. Behind that door were weapon systems that Earth had developed over 2 centuries but never deployed. The railguns that could crack a planet's crust. The antimatter torpedoes that made nuclear weapons look like fireworks. The tactical artificial intelligence systems that could coordinate 10,000 ships in perfect harmony. Are you sure about this? His assistant asked. Dr. Sunwoo thought about Taemin. He had known the envoy personally. They had been friends. Taemin had been a good man who believed in peace. The Vortons had killed him for it. I'm sure, he said, and pressed his hand to the scanner. The vault door opened. Across human space, the preparations continued. It was like watching a sleeping giant wake up. Earth had not been sleeping because it was weak. It had been sleeping because it chose peace. But now peace was no longer an option. Captain Heejin received new orders at the shipyard where the Eternal Dawn was being repaired. The ship would no longer be a diplomatic vessel. It was being converted into a warship. The new name was already being painted on its hull. Vengeance. Lieutenant Daehyun stood beside her, watching the workers install weapon systems along the ship's sides. He had dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep, but his expression was hard and focused. Are you ready for this? Heejin asked him. I've been ready since the moment they killed the envoy, he replied. I just wish we had been allowed to save him. That was the old rules, Heejin said. We have new rules now. The new rules were simple. Humans would not target civilians. They would not use biological weapons. They would accept surrenders and treat prisoners according to galactic law. But beyond that, everything was authorized. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy. The galaxy watched humanity's mobilization with a mix of emotions. Some species were impressed by the speed and scale. Others were concerned. A few were quietly terrified. The Keltharian ambassador sent a message to the Galactic Council. I have reviewed human military history. They have fought approximately 15,000 recorded wars in their past. They have developed over 2 million different weapon designs. They have written 6,000 treatises on military strategy, and they have spent the last 200 years not fighting, but preparing. The Vortons have no idea what they have started. But Overlord Krent was not worried. His military advisors assured him that Vorton technology was superior. Their soldiers were stronger, their ships were faster, and humans had no combat experience. They were pacifists playing at war. He held a broadcast to his people, standing in the Grand Council chamber where Taman had died. The bloodstains had been cleaned away, but the memory remained. The humans threaten us with war, he said, his voice full of contempt. Let them come. We will crush them as we crushed their envoy. We will take their colonies. We will prove that the strong rule and the weak serve. This is the way of the galaxy. His people cheered. His military commanders saluted. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. But a few of the older Vorton warriors, those who had studied other species carefully, were not cheering. They remembered something they had read about humans. Something disturbing. Humans were one of the few species that had nearly destroyed themselves through war, not because they were attacked, but because they were too good at fighting. They had developed weapons so terrible that they almost wiped out their own civilization. And then they had made a choice. Never again. But that choice was not weakness. It was discipline, and discipline could be unleashed just as easily as it could be maintained. 3 weeks after Taman's death, the first human war fleet assembled near Mars. 300 warships of various classes, from small destroyers to massive carriers. They had been built over decades officially for defense, but their designs included offensive capabilities that Earth had hoped never to use. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable, and looked at the fleet assembled before him. Behind him stood his senior officers, including Captain Heejan, now promoted to Commodore, and Colonel Borum, commander of the 1st Marine Assault Division. Today, Minho said, we begin Operation Righteous Fury. Our mission is not conquest. It is justice. The Vortons have declared through their actions that they do not respect life, do not honor peace, and do not deserve mercy. We will teach them that humanity chose peace not from weakness but from wisdom, and when wisdom is ignored, we remember how to fight. He activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Admiral Minho. In 60 seconds, we jump to the border zones. Our target is Crichton Station, the Vorton Forward Command Base. We will destroy their military infrastructure. We will cripple their ability to wage war. And we will show them that killing humans has a price they cannot afford to pay. All ships prepare for quantum jump. May we fight with honor and return with victory. The countdown began. 60 seconds, 50, 40. On Earth, billions watched on screens as the fleet prepared to jump. Children watched with their parents. Elderly people who remembered the resource wars watched with tears in their eyes, hoping this war would not cost as much as the last one. Young people watched with determination, ready to serve if called. 10 seconds, 5, 3, 2, 1. 300 human warships vanished from Mars orbit in a flash of light. They were heading to Vortan space. They were heading to war, and across the galaxy, the old species, the ones who remembered humanity's violent past, sent a message to the Vorton collective. It was simple and direct. You should have chosen peace. Now you will learn why humans offered it so desperately. They were not trying to protect you from themselves. They were trying to protect you from what they become when peace fails. Overlord Krent received the message and laughed. Let the old species worry. Let them send their warnings. The Vortons were ready. They had killed the human envoy. They would kill the human fleet. And then they would take everything humans had built. He was so confident, so certain, so completely wrong. The war was about to start, and humanity was about to remind the galaxy why they had been so determined to avoid it. The human fleet emerged from quantum space like ghosts appearing from darkness. One moment, the space around Crichton Station was empty. The next moment, 300 warships materialized in perfect formation. The Vorton sensors screamed alerts, but by the time the station's defenders could react, it was already too late. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display. Kryton Station hung in space like a mechanical spider, its weapons platforms bristling with plasma cannons and missile launchers. Around it, 40 Vortan warships patrolled in defensive positions. They were scrambling now, trying to form battle lines, but their formations were chaotic. They had not expected this. No one attacked the Vortan collective in their own space. No one was that bold, until now. All ships, Minho said calmly. Commence Operation Righteous Fury. Target the station's shield generators first, then weapons platforms. Avoid unnecessary casualties but destroy every military asset. Show them what human precision looks like. The battle began. Human railguns fired first. Not the crude chemical weapons of Earth's past, but electromagnetic accelerators that launched projectiles at a fraction of light speed. The rounds were simple metal slugs, but at that velocity, they hit like bombs. 3 of Kryton Station's shield generators exploded in sequence, their protective fields collapsing. The Vortan warships opened fire, their plasma cannons lighting up space with green and yellow energy. But the human ships moved in patterns the Vortans had never seen. They used vector mathematics calculated by artificial intelligence, positioning themselves in overlapping fields of fire while maintaining defensive formations. Every human captain acted in perfect coordination, like musicians following the same conductor. Commodore Hyejin commanded the vengeance from the center of the formation. She had waited weeks for this moment, remembering Taemin's death, remembering her helplessness. Now she had a chance to act. Target the orbital command center, she ordered. Fire when ready. Her ship's main cannon charged and released. The antimatter torpedo streaked across space in a blue-white flash. It struck the command center dead center. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the entire section of the station simply ceased to exist. Matter and antimatter annihilating each other in a silent explosion that was beautiful and terrible. Lieutenant Daehyun, now promoted to commander and serving as Hyejin's tactical officer, watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. Direct hit. Command center destroyed. Station coordination is failing. Good, Hyejin said. Next target. The Vortan warships tried to adapt. They were not cowards. They had conquered 12 star systems through military might. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Human ships took damage but kept fighting. Human weapons fired with impossible accuracy, and the humans seemed to predict every Vortan tactic seconds before it happened. On one of the Vortan destroyers, Warlord Thexus commanded his crew with growing desperation. He was a veteran of 30 battles, but this was different. The humans moved like they could read his mind. Fire all missiles, he ordered. Target that carrier. His ship launched a full spread of plasma missiles. They should have overwhelmed any defense. But the human carrier simply moved, its engines firing in precise bursts that seemed to defy physics. The missiles passed harmlessly by. Then the carrier's defensive guns opened fire, and every single missile was destroyed before it could loop back around. How? Thexus whispered. How are they doing this? His sensor officer provided the answer. Sir, their tactical computers are processing information 50 times faster than ours. They're predicting our attacks before we make them. We're fighting their machines as much as their ships. Thexus felt something he had never experienced in battle before. Fear. All ships, fall back to the station, he ordered. We need to regroup. But falling back was not an option. The human fleet had surrounded Kryton Station in a perfect sphere. Every escape route was covered. Every defensive position was under fire. The Vortans were trapped. From the Indomitable, Admiral Minho watched the battle unfold with a mix of satisfaction and regret. The human fleet was performing perfectly, but this was still war. Still killing. Still destruction. Sir, his communication officer said, we're receiving surrender requests from 4 Vortan ships. Accept their surrender, Minho ordered immediately. Provide them safe corridors to withdraw. We are not here to commit genocide. We are here to end a threat. 4 Vortan warships powered down their weapons and retreated under human escort. Their crews would be taken as prisoners and treated according to galactic law. Earth still had rules even in war, but the remaining Vortan ships fought on. Warlord Thexus refused to surrender. His honor would not allow it. He charged his ship directly at the Indomitable, all weapons firing in a desperate assault. Disable his weapons, Minho ordered. I want him alive. Human gunners targeted Thexus's ship with surgical precision. One by one, the Vortan destroyer's weapons were destroyed. Then its engines. Then its life support. The ship went dark, drifting in space. "Sir," the sensor officer reported, "we're detecting an emergency beacon from that ship. The crew is requesting rescue." "Send a recovery team," Minho said. "Pull them out." They fought with courage. They deserved to live. This was the difference between humans and the Vortans who had murdered Taman. Humans could show mercy even in the middle of battle. They could kill when necessary but save when possible. It was not weakness. It was discipline. While the space battle raged, the second phase of the operation began. Colonel Borum led the 1st Marine Assault Division toward Crichton Station's remaining sections. Their mission was to secure the station's computer cores and communication systems. Information was as important as destruction. The Marine assault ships were small, fast, and heavily armored. They approached the station through the debris field created by the battle, using the wreckage as cover. Borum sat in the lead ship, checking her combat suit one final time. She was 45 years old, had trained for 30 years, and had never fired a shot in combat. That was about to change. "All units," she said over the Marine channel. "Remember your training. We are better than them. We are faster, smarter, and more determined. They killed our diplomat. They murdered innocent people. Now we show them what happens when you make humans angry. Go in hard, go in fast, and let's end this." The assault ships punched through the station's hull in 6 different locations simultaneously. Marines poured out, their combat suits painted in Earth's blue and white colors. The Vortan defenders were waiting, but they had never faced human infantry before. Human soldiers moved in ways the Vortans found disturbing. They used cover perfectly. They coordinated without speaking, their suit computers linking them in a shared tactical network. They threw grenades with mathematical precision, and they aimed their weapons with accuracy that seemed impossible. Sergeant Tajan led his squad through the station's corridors. He was 28 years old, had joined the Marines right out of school, and had spent 10 years training for combat that never came. Now it was here, and he was ready. "Contact front!" his point man shouted. 10 Vortan soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor, their plasma rifles firing. Tajan's squad reacted instantly. Half dove left, half dove right, using the corridor walls for cover. Their return fire was controlled, aimed, professional. Within seconds, the Vortan soldiers were down. "Check them," Tajan ordered. "If any are alive, treat their wounds. We're not killers, we're soldiers." 3 of the Vortan soldiers were still breathing. The human medic worked on them immediately, applying emergency medical foam and stabilizing their injuries. The Vortans watched in confusion. Why were the humans helping them? "Because we're better than you," Tajan said simply, reading their expressions through their helmets. The Marines pushed deeper into the station. Colonel Borum led the assault on the computer core, fighting through desperate Vortan defenders. Her rifle never stopped firing. Her orders never stopped coming. She was a force of nature, and her Marines followed her with absolute confidence. They reached the core 20 minutes after the assault began. Vortan technicians were trying to purge the data systems. Borum shot the control panel, stopping the purge. "Secure this room," she ordered. "Download everything. I want their tactical plans, their fleet positions, their command codes, everything." Human cyber warfare specialists plugged into the Vortan systems. Their infiltration programs, developed over decades of preparation, cracked the Vortan security in minutes. Data flowed into human servers. Every secret the Vortans had kept was now exposed. Back in space, the battle was ending. Of the 40 Vortan warships that had defended Crichton Station, 10 had surrendered, 22 had been destroyed, and 8 had managed to escape. Crichton Station itself was a burning wreck, its weapons platforms destroyed, its shields down, its command structure eliminated. Admiral Minho stood on his bridge and felt no joy in the victory. War was not something to celebrate. It was something to endure and end as quickly as possible. "All ships report casualties," he ordered. The numbers came back. 7 human ships damaged, 2 destroyed, 412 human sailors dead, another 600 wounded. The price of victory. But the Vortans had lost far more. Over 3,000 soldiers and crew dead or wounded. An entire military base eliminated. And most importantly, their sense of invincibility shattered. "Send this message to Overlord Krenth," Minho said. "This is Admiral Minho of the Earth Defense Fleet. We have destroyed Crichton Station. We have captured or destroyed 40 of your warships. We have taken your military secrets. This is the price for murdering our envoy. If you wish to avoid further losses, surrender now and face justice. If you continue this war, we will take it to your homeworld. You have 24 hours to respond. The message was sent across the galaxy, broadcast on every channel. The entire Galactic Council heard it. Every species saw the footage of the battle. The humans, supposedly weak and peaceful, had just destroyed a Vortan military base in 3 hours with minimal losses. The old species nodded knowingly. The younger species watched in shock, and the Vortan collective, for the first time in their history, felt something they had never experienced before: doubt. On Drumath Prime, Overlord Krenth watched the battle reports with growing rage. This was impossible. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to panic and beg for peace. Instead, they had struck like lightning and disappeared like ghosts. His military commanders stood silently, none wanting to speak first. Finally, his chief advisor, General Zalth, cleared his throat. "Overlord, the humans are more dangerous than we calculated. Perhaps we should consider negotiations." Krenth turned on him with fury. "Negotiations? They destroyed an entire base. They humiliated us in front of the galaxy. And you want to talk?" "I want to survive," Zalth said quietly. "These humans are not what we thought they were." Krenth raised his weapon and shot his advisor dead. The body fell at his feet. The other commanders backed away. "There will be no negotiations," Krenth said. "There will be no surrender. We will crush these humans, mobilize the entire fleet. We attack their colonies in 1 week. If they want war, we will give them war." But in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered doubt. The humans had been holding back for 200 years. What else were they hiding? What other weapons did they have? And what would happen when they stopped restraining themselves completely? The war had just started, and already the Vortans were learning a terrible lesson. Never wake a sleeping giant. And never underestimate humans who have chosen peace. They chose it not because they forgot how to fight, but because they remembered it too well. 3 weeks after the Battle of Crichton Station, the human fleet had grown to over 500 warships. They moved through Vortan space like a storm, destroying military installations and capturing strategic positions. Admiral Minho had hoped the Vortans would surrender after the first defeat. They had not. Overlord Krenth had mobilized his entire military in order to fight to the death. Now the human fleet was heading to Drumath Prime itself. The Vortan homeworld, the seat of their power, the place where Taman had died. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Minho reviewed the final attack plans. His senior officers stood around the holographic display showing Drumath Prime and its orbital defenses. The planet was protected by 300 defense platforms, 5 orbital battle stations, and a fleet of 200 warships. It was the most heavily defended world in Vortan space. "Sir," Commodore Hijin said, "intelligence reports that the Vortans are evacuating civilians from the capital city. They think we're going to bomb them." Minho shook his head. "We're not monsters. Send them a message. Tell them we have no intention of targeting civilians. Our fight is with their military and their leaders, not their people." "Will they believe us?" asked Lieutenant Commander Daehyun. "Probably not," Minho admitted. "But we'll prove it through actions. We strike only military targets, nothing else." On Earth, the war had changed society. Production facilities ran 24 hours a day. Schools taught basic defense skills. Every citizen had a role in the war effort. But there was also debate. Not everyone agreed with how far the war should go. Dr. Sunwoo had traveled to Geneva to speak before the Defense Council. He stood in the same chamber where the war had been authorized, looking at President Kangman and the other leaders. "We have proven our point," he said. "The Vortans know they cannot defeat us. We have destroyed 12 of their military bases, captured 37 of their warships, and pushed them back to their homeworld. If we attack Drumath Prime, thousands more will die. Perhaps hundreds of thousands. Is revenge worth that price?" General Unji was there to argue the opposite position. She stood and faced the council with fire in her eyes. "This is not about revenge. This is about making sure this never happens again. If we stop now, if we show mercy before total victory, then every aggressive species in the galaxy will think they can kill our diplomats and face only limited consequences. We must finish this. We must break the Vortan military completely so they never threaten anyone again." President Kangman listened to both sides. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. The weight of war was visible on his face. "The fleet will proceed to Drumath Prime," he said finally. "But the objective is not destruction. It is surrender. We will give Overlord Krenth one final chance to end this peacefully. If he refuses, we will remove his ability to make war but preserve his civilization. We are humans. We do not commit genocide no matter how angry we are. The debate continued, but the decision was made. The human fleet arrived at Drumath Prime on a cold morning, Vortan time. The planet hung in space like a red jewel, beautiful and deadly. The Vortan defense fleet moved to intercept, their ships forming battle lines between the humans and their homeworld. Admiral Minho opened a communication, channeled directly to Overlord Krenth. This is Admiral Minho of the Earth Defense Fleet. We are here to end this war. Surrender now and face justice for the murder of our envoy. Your military will be disarmed. Your people will be protected. We do not wish to destroy your civilization. We only want peace and justice. There was a long silence. Then Krenth's voice came through the speakers full of rage. Peace? Justice? You invade our space and speak of peace? You are in our home system and speak of justice? Never. The Vortan Collective will fight until the last ship falls. We do not surrender to prey animals. Minho closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of what would come next. Then you force our hand. We will do what we must. The Battle of Drumath Prime began. The Vortan fleet charged forward, all weapons firing. It was a desperate assault, throwing everything they had at the human ships. The orbital defense platforms opened fire as well, filling space with plasma bolts and missiles. It was the largest concentration of firepower the Vortans had ever assembled. The human fleet met them with cold precision. They didn't charge. They didn't panic. They simply executed their battle plan with machine efficiency. Human ships moved in calculated patterns, their artificial intelligence coordinating hundreds of vessels in perfect harmony. When they fired, their weapons hit targets with pinpoint accuracy. Commodore Hyojin commanded the Vengeance in the center of the formation. Beside her, Commander Daehyun worked his tactical console with steady hands. He had dreamed of this moment, of making the Vortans pay for killing Taemin. But now that it was happening, he felt no joy, just a grim determination to end it. Target those orbital platforms, Hyojin ordered. Disable them, but don't destroy them completely. We want to be able to rebuild. Understood, Daehyun replied. He locked targeting solutions on the platform's power generators and weapon systems. The Vengeance fired, and 3 platforms went dark. Their weapons offline, but their structures intact. Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. Human ships disabled rather than destroyed whenever possible. They captured enemy vessels that surrendered. They rescued Vortan crews from damaged ships. Even in the heat of battle, they maintained their discipline and their humanity. But the Vortans fought with desperate fury. They knew they were losing, but their pride would not let them surrender. Warlord Thexus, freed from human custody in a prisoner exchange, commanded a group of Vortan destroyers in a suicide run against the Indomitable. For the Collective, he screamed as his ships charged. Admiral Minho watched them come. He could have destroyed them all easily. Instead, he ordered his ships to fire on their engines only. One by one, the Vortan destroyers lost power and drifted to a halt. Thexus's ship was the last, its engines burning out just as it was about to collide with the flagship. Minho opened a channel to Thexus's ship.
Warlord, you fought with honor.
Now accept the inevitable. Your side has lost. Further fighting only wastes lives. Thexus's response came after a long pause. You should have killed us. That is what warriors do. We are not warriors, Minho replied. We are soldiers. There is a difference. Warriors seek glory. Soldiers seek to end conflict. Your crew will be rescued and treated well. When this war is over, you will go home. Colonel Borum led another marine assault, this time targeting the largest orbital battle station. Her troops fought through Vortan defenders with practiced efficiency, capturing section after section. But she also ordered her medics to treat wounded Vortan soldiers. When Vortan civilians were found hiding in the station's lower levels, she had them evacuated to safety rather than leaving them in a combat zone. A young Vortan civilian, a female named Zella, stared at the human colonel in confusion. Why are you helping us? We are enemies. Borum knelt down to the child's eye level. You are not my enemy. Your leaders are. You are just a person who got caught in the middle of a war you didn't start. When this is over, you will need to rebuild. I want you to remember that humans are not monsters. We're just people who fight when we must and show mercy when we can. After 6 hours of battle, the Vortan fleet was broken. Half their ships were destroyed or disabled. The orbital platforms were offline. The battle stations were captured. And still Overlord Krenth refused to surrender. General Yunji, observing from the command ship, urged Admiral Minho to authorize a final strike. Take out their planetary defense grid. Show them we can reach the surface if we choose. Force the surrender. Minho hesitated. The planetary defense grid protected cities and civilian centers. Destroying it would leave the planet vulnerable to orbital bombardment. It would be a clear message. Surrender or we can destroy everything you have. But it would also kill thousands of Vortan civilians in the defense installations. No, Minho said finally. I will not kill civilians to make a point. There is another way. He opened a channel not to Overlord Krenth but to the Vortan people directly. He broadcast on every frequency, every channel, every communication system on the planet. People of the Vortan Collective, this is Admiral Minho of Earth. Your military has been defeated. Your orbital defenses are down. We could destroy your cities from orbit. We have the weapons. We have the ships. We have the ability. But we will not. Because we did not come here to commit genocide. We came here to seek justice for our murdered envoy, and to ensure you never threaten peace again. Your overlord has led you into a war you cannot win. He murdered our diplomat. He sent your soldiers to die for his pride. We ask you now, do you want this to continue? Do you want your cities destroyed? Your children killed? Or do you want to end this and rebuild? The message spread across the planet. In the streets of the capital, Vortan civilians watched the human fleet hanging in orbit. They could see the firepower. They could see the devastation the humans had inflicted on the military, and they realized that the humans had been holding back. If the humans had wanted to destroy them, they would already be dead. In the Grand Council chamber where Taman had died, Overlord Krenth watched the message and felt his power slipping away. His commanders were silent, his soldiers were defeated, and his people were turning against him. A group of Vortan elders, led by a female named Krenthala, entered the chamber with armed guards. They were the ancient council, the traditional leaders who had been pushed aside when Krenth took power through military force. It is over, Krenthala said. Your war has failed. You have led our people to the edge of destruction. We are removing you from power. Krenth raised his weapon, but his own guards did not move to help him. They had seen enough. They had lost too many friends in a war that should never have been fought. Traitors, Krenth hissed. All of you. No, Krenthala said. We are trying to save our civilization from your pride. She opened a channel to the human fleet. Admiral Minho, this is Council Elder Krenthala. On behalf of the Vortan people, we wish to negotiate surrender. Overlord Krenth will be delivered to you for trial. We ask only that you spare our people and allow us to rebuild. Admiral Minho felt a wave of relief wash over him. Your surrender is accepted. Overlord Krenth will be tried by the Galactic Council for war crimes. Your military will be disarmed and restructured, but your civilization will continue. We will help you rebuild what we destroyed. That is the human way. The war ended not with a final explosion, but with a treaty. Overlord Krenth was arrested and transported to the Galactic Council for trial. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, not execution. Even the humans who had lost so much refused to kill a defeated enemy. The Vortan military was disbanded and rebuilt under Galactic Council supervision. Human engineers helped repair the damage from the war. Human medical teams treated wounded Vortan soldiers and civilians, and slowly the Vortans began to understand what they had misunderstood from the beginning. Humans were not weak. They were disciplined. They did not fear war. They feared unnecessary war. 6 months after the war ended, a memorial was built on Earth. It stood in a park in Geneva near the Defense Council chambers. The statue showed Envoy Taman with one hand extended in peace, the other holding a treaty document. Behind him stood figures representing the soldiers and sailors who had fought to avenge him. The inscription read, "He died seeking peace. We fought to preserve it. May we never forget the cost of either." On the dedication day, thousands gathered. President Kangmin gave a speech. General Yunji presented medals to the families of the fallen, and Colonel Boram, now retired, placed flowers at the base of the statue. Among the crowd was a young woman named Sulgi. She wore the uniform of the Diplomatic Academy. She had watched the war on screens as a teenager and decided she wanted to be a diplomat, to continue Taman's work. An elderly man stood beside the memorial, his face scarred from burns. He was Sergeant Minsu, one of the few security officers who had survived the assassination. He saw Solgi's uniform and approached her. "You want to be a diplomat?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Someone has to keep trying for peace." Minsu smiled sadly. "Even after what happened to Envoy Taman?" "Especially after what happened to him," Solgi said. "He proved that peace is worth dying for. The war proved that humans can fight when necessary, but we should only fight when all other options are exhausted. That is what makes us different. That is what makes us human." Minsu nodded. "Then you understand the real lesson. Peace is not the absence of strength. It is the choice to restrain it. Remember that and you will honor his memory." As the ceremony ended, a ship arrived in Earth orbit. It carried a delegation from the reformed Vortan government. They had come to officially apologize for the assassination and to begin the work of building real peace between their species. The Galactic Council had been transformed by the war. Other aggressive species had reconsidered their expansionist policies. The old belief that humans were weak had been replaced by a new understanding. Humans were peaceful by choice, not necessity. And that choice made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy when provoked. Admiral Minho, now serving as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, stood before the assembled species and gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. "We did not want this war. We tried everything to avoid it. But when our diplomats were murdered, when peace was rejected through bloodshed, we responded, not with mindless violence, but with disciplined force. We destroyed military targets but spared civilians. We captured enemies but treated them humanely. We won the war but did not destroy our enemy's civilization. This is the human way. We are capable of great violence, but we choose great restraint. We can destroy, but we prefer to build. We can kill, but we prefer to save. Other species may see this as weakness. They are wrong. This is strength. The strength to choose peace even when war is easier. The strength to show mercy even when revenge is tempting. And the strength to remember that our enemies today may be our friends tomorrow if we give them the chance." The speech was broadcast across the galaxy. It changed how every species viewed humanity. Earth was no longer seen as timid or passive. They were seen as wise and powerful, a species that had learned from their own violent past and chosen a better path. In a small apartment on Drumath Prime, a young Vortan named Kethis watched the speech with his parent Zella, the child Colonel Borum had saved during the battle. Zella had never forgotten the human soldier who showed her mercy. "Mama," Kethis asked, "are humans still our enemies?" Zella thought about the question carefully. "No," she said finally. "They were never our enemies. Overlord Krenth made them our enemies by killing their diplomat." The humans simply responded, "They taught us a hard lesson, but they did not destroy us. That is not what enemies do. Perhaps one day they will be our friends." Years passed. The wounds of war healed slowly. Vortan and human scientists began working together. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges began. And slowly, carefully, friendship grew where war had been. The memorial to Envoy Taman stood as a reminder that peace is precious, a reminder that words are powerful, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, even when fighting is the last thing you want to do. And across human space, on every military base and every warship, a new motto was adopted. It was simple, direct, and true. We are peaceful. We are not weak. Remember the difference. The galaxy had learned. Humanity had shown them. Peace was not the inability to fight. It was the wisdom to avoid fighting until no other option remained. And when that final option came, when peace failed and war began, humanity would fight with everything they had. Not for glory, not for conquest, but for justice for their fallen, and for the hope that one day true peace could be achieved. The war was over. The lesson was learned. And Envoy Taman's dream of peace, though paid for in blood, would live on in the galaxy he had tried so hard to unite.